We are going to get started in the next minute or so, so if everybody wants to find their seats, make sure that everybody's kind of where they want to be for this evening. And Jamie, where did you go? Did I lose Jamie Lee? She's the shyest popped up. She was just here. And there.
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay, before we get started, I'd like to take a moment just to welcome everybody. Appreciate everyone being here. Mr. Prather will not be available to join us this evening, but prior to calling the meeting to order, just a few logistics. This will be the microphone that I'll pass around, so if you are wanting to make sure that you're heard and want to make sure that we capture your comments for the record, just raise your hand and I'll pass it either to the panel or to any of the council members so we can make sure that your comments are captured. Otherwise, I think the only other thing Jamie mentioned was to make sure we speak up, because she'll be situated over in the corner. So we have specific staff requests of Jamie Lee. She'll be over there. So with that, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a workshop for the San Marcos City Council for Monday, August 29th, 2016. It is about 5:31 p.m. Jamie Lee, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Houston. Here. Mr. Prather. Garretson. Here. You have a quorum present.
And as I mentioned, Mr. Prather will not be here this evening. With that, then, Jamie, I'm going to go ahead and read the caption.
Okay.
Okay, and the only item for this evening, participate in a panel discussion with a panel of experts from the Central Texas region with knowledge and experience in working with communities to deliver diverse and affordable housing options, and hold discussion and receive a staff presentation regarding city staff heard during the public comment period and the next steps in the CodeSMTX process, and provide direction to staff. And you also have a secondary agenda here, so what I'd like to do is I'll go ahead and pass the microphone. I guess I'll bring it over to Abby. We'll go all the way around for opening introductions.
So my name is Abby Gilpone. I'm planning manager at the City of San Marcos. I'm also managing this CodeSMTX process.
I'm Shannon Mattingly. I'm the Director of Planning for the City of San Marcos.
I'm Jared Miller. I'm the City Manager for the City of San Marcos.
John Tomides, City Council.
Jane Newsom, Council Member.
Scott Garretson, City Council.
Daniel Cadell, Mayor.
Melissa Derrick, City Council.
Lisa Pruitt, City Council.
Brian Kelsey from Civic Analytics in Austin.
Sean Garretson with Pegasus Planning and Development.
Adriana Cruz, Greater San Marcos Partnership.
Jim Adams with McCann Adams Studio.
Cherry Mitchell with Momark Development. Abby, will you be doing the overview for us?
There's really not much for me to say in way of kickoff that the mayor didn't already say. We're really going to be focused tonight on housing and housing options, discussion with our panelists. Thank you all very much. Abby's going to take a little bit of time to introduce everyone and give a little more familiarity with who our panelists are, but that's going to be an opportunity for panelists to discuss a variety of questions regarding to our code and housing. We're also going to have an opportunity for some back and forth with council and the panelists on our housing topics, on our housing and affordable housing. Then we'll have a break, and our panelists will be able to take off, or they can stay if they want. We're going to go over comments that we received from the public and from our think tank and anyone else with regard to the CodeSMTX process. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and hand it over to Abby to get us rolling. We want to be respectful of y'all's time, so we're going to be as workmanlike as we can. Yes, sir.
And before we go into it, would you mind, Jared, just from there, why we're meeting here as opposed to council chambers? I think it might be worthwhile at least expressing why we're here.
Well, we're having our technology upgraded at the council chamber. The council chambers are we're going to go into a high definition camera system. We're going to go to electronic voting. We're going to we're moving into at least the 2000s and abandoning our 80s technology. So we will have a much enhanced ability to broadcast, to rebroadcast our council meetings, and you'll be able to see people's faces. You'll be able to see what the presentation actually is on the screen. I know that's been a challenge over time, so we're going to have a very enhanced technology set. And that's going to be active for this next council meeting on September 6th.
Thank you. Abby?
Um, Has a chance to get their questions, out. So why are we doing this? Why is planning important? I think that I show this example a lot. I think it's really important to look at and to see, because I think it's a great example of planning and of how a community can get together to really shape their growth and to shape their future. So this was downtown in 2008. This is when folks came together and said, we need a master plan. We're seeing businesses go out of our downtown. We've got vacant properties. So this is at the corner of Hutchison and LBJ. In 2011, we implemented part of that downtown master plan with the adoption of our smart code downtown. And so that was in 2011. You can already see in the picture that things are starting to shape up and starting to look better. New businesses are there, and that's really a result of the community focusing on that area. And here we are, present day, in 2016. It's a very different place on that corner from where we started. So I think it's a great example of what we can do as a community. So again, this is where we started in 2008. What our task is to take our comprehensive plan for the whole city, which was adopted in 2013, and to make sure that our zoning and our land use regulations are in line with that comprehensive plan so that we can achieve that vision. So this is our zoning map here, and you can see a lot of different colors, all mixed in together. We have about 30 different zoning districts, and every single one of them, for the most part, besides our downtown, is really a 100% use-based zoning district. So we don't talk about in those zoning districts the type of place that those districts create and make up. The only thing that we talk about is the use, which means that if you're a commercial development, that's your use. It's the same no matter where you are on that big comp plan map, whether you're in an intensity zone, whether you're in a neighborhood area like along Old Ranch Road 12, whether you're on I-35, all of our development standards are exactly the same because you're commercial and that's your use. And so that's what we're trying to do is to change that so that we do have codes and tools in place so we can create the types of development and the places that our comprehensive plan talks about. A lot of our uses, this is kind of a pixelated picture, but this is what it looks like in a lot of different areas. It's a whole mishmash of bunches of different uses just jammed in there. And it really doesn't provide much predictability in the type of development we're going to see in those areas overall. So there's not a lot of, it just doesn't match our comprehensive plan. What we've done, the places that our comprehensive plan really focused on, and that the community, we've heard throughout this process from the community, that some of the development types that we've seen that haven't been working and really aren't in line with our comprehensive plan are the high density, medium density residential, as well as commercial along our gateways and corridors. But those types of development are not meeting that vision that we set for the community. So those are the types of districts that we looked at creating new districts that do a better job of meeting our vision. So those districts, with CodeSMTX, we're not rezoning properties. What we're doing, we're taking a staged approach at this. So we wanted to, was one of the things that we heard throughout this process is, wait a minute, we want to see the codes first. We want to see all the rules first before you talk about rezoning any properties and changing them on the ground. That's something that we heard definitely through the neighborhood character planning process. We actually, I'll go into a little bit more about the process later on, but We've sent letters out to property owners as well. We've heard that in their intensity zones, in those areas on the comp plan map where we said these are areas of change, these are areas that we want to see different development, we've heard that those are areas that would be appropriate to look at starting to rezone. We're going to keep that as a second step in this process, as an implementation step, but where we definitely wanted to make sure to spend some more time was in those areas of stability on the comp plan map. So CodeSMTX is a three-phase process. We established our vision. That's really one of the most important parts. It's one of the most important processes because you can't create codes, rules, regulations without knowing what you're trying to create. It just doesn't work. So we've created the vision, so we have the vision. CodeSMTX is going to be the tools that allow us to get there, but the real way that you get there is that you have to rezone property in order to change their rules, the rules on those properties. So that can happen after CodeSMTX is adopted. That can happen in one of two ways. Either property owners can come in and request a new zoning district, and that goes through a full zoning process, right? So property owner comes in, they're in an area where our comp plan said this is the type of development we want to see. Well, now we have zoning districts that match that type of development. Currently, we don't. When CodeSMTX is adopted, we will. So they'll have good options and choices to pick from that are actually in our code to be able to zone properties to. So that's one way. And then the other way, what I just talked about a little bit, is that as a city, we can come together and do what's called city-initiated zoning, where the council decides these are areas based on our comprehensive plan, based on work that we've done with neighborhoods and in the community, where we think that it's important that we go out and put the proper codes on the ground in those places so that we make sure to see development that's consistent with our comp plan in those areas. So, like I said though, that is the third step after we get the rules adopted. I think it's an important thing to do it in a two-step process because you really want to have rules written down before you start talking about changing people's property rights and what they can do with their property. They need to be able to see what it is. All right, how should we grow? I talked a lot about our comp plan, has a vision, goals, and objectives. And it also has a map that goes along with that that talks about where we should grow. It's got different colors there that represent different things. The dark purple, those are areas of change. Those are areas the community came together and said, look, we know we're growing really fast and we want to plan for that growth. We want to put the people that are coming, the vast majority of these people that are coming, we want to put them in those intensity zones. And so that's what those are, those purple areas. The pink are the employment centers. The community said, we recognize that we're going to need jobs. We need jobs already, and we're going to need more jobs as more people come. And we've got land that we've worked hard to set up as good places for employment type uses, and we need to make sure that those stay ready for employment. The community said, here's our existing neighborhoods. We've seen a lot of stuff that's gone on and gone into our neighborhoods that we're not real happy about, and here are the things that we would like to see. Here's the type of development that is appropriate, and that type of development is the kind that's the same as what we've already got. So those are areas of stability. That's where we're not anticipating a lot of change. What we want is development to happen there that is the same as what's already around them. So I'm going to go a little bit more into details of each one of these. This is what the comp plan says about an intensity zone. It's a high-density, mixed-use development with the infrastructure to support that. It's walkable, and there's integrated transit corridors. This isn't something that happens overnight, right? We don't rezone these areas and all of a sudden they totally change form. It happens over time, over lots of time. But the problem is right now, we have, in this particular area, for example, there's about 5 or 6 different zoning districts. Each one is based entirely on the use. If people want to build that building that's on the right, they're not allowed to under our current code. And so that's a problem because that's what our comp plan wants to see there. And so if we want mixed use buildings, it's not allowed to happen. So we need to look at creating, so we've created new zoning districts that allow that to happen. So now there's one district that mixes all of those uses and creates the type of development that the comp plan wanted to see in those areas. Another place that we've heard a lot from the community on is along corridors. So we've created new zoning districts and gateways. We've created new zoning districts that address that and that look at what is the type of development that we want to see along our gateways and in our corridors and in our larger employment areas as well, in order to create attractive places. Those are places that have landscaping, screening of parking, sidewalks. Those are the types of things that we want to see along those corridors. We've also talked about corridors that go into neighborhoods. These are neighborhood gateways. These are areas that need to be approached differently than other places. They should be walkable. This is a place where people should be able to walk. You're in a neighborhood. It shouldn't be entirely auto-centric. And so we've got new types of codes that can address those places. One of the biggest things that we've heard throughout this process is to make San Marcos more walkable and bikeable. And that's a big thing that we've done with this code, is provide those types of amenities to make that happen. In neighborhoods, our goals are that neighborhoods are protected and enhanced in order to maintain a high quality of life and stable property values. We also need to see that there's diversified housing options to serve citizens with varying needs and interests. And that's something we're going to talk a little more about today. We look at some of the areas in town now, and we have a pretty mix of zoning, right? Some of that place I zoomed in before, there's lots of different types of zoning districts all in one area that's a really small area in some spots. And so we've created some new options to be able to support development in those areas that provide some more diverse housing options, things like the cottage-style housing and smaller housing. So if you look in this area, you've got neighborhood commercial, light industrial, general commercial, mixed use, single family, townhouse, duplex, all within a 6-block radius. All those zoning districts together, they don't create a place. They don't create a sense of place. And so if somebody were to come in and redevelop those under our current rules, it wouldn't look like we would want it to look as a community, or like our comp plan has talked about it looking. And so we put in new standards and new codes that are options in those places. Like I said, nowhere is rezoned with this code. So that's something we would go back out, and that's another process. The other thing that we've incorporated are new tools. Tools like buffers, transitions. Those are things that we don't have right now in our code. So right now, when you transition from a really high intensity area to single family, there are no requirements along that transition. So those are things that are added. We've added them at 3 different levels. So we start off with at the comp plan level. You're going from a whole new comp plan classification from high intensity to existing neighborhood, for example. There's a certain level of transitions and buffer, and those are the highest level of transition and buffer. When you go from one zoning district to another, there's another layer of transitions and buffers that are appropriate at that level. And then, even within the same zoning district, if you're doing infill development and you've got certain types of setbacks all along an existing street, and you're going to add a home next to the rest of those homes, then you should match what's there, the current setbacks. And so that's the lowest level of transitions and buffers. So we've added all 3 of those. They also address elements like transportation, where access is taken, particularly at that highest level. And then you all have seen this before, but we've also enhanced the way that we regulate by use. So we are now able to do more than just say, yes, it's allowed, no, it's not allowed, or go ask the planning commission. Now we have a whole 3rd option that says, yes, it's allowed, but here are the standards that go along with it. And so that's a whole 4th option that's in there now that wasn't there before within our land use matrix. So it's not that zoning, or it's not that use goes away, use actually stays, and it's enhanced in how we can regulate use. So that's a really important distinction. That I want to transition a little and sort of start to set the stage for our panel discussion. We're here today to talk about affordability. And so one thing I did is I went back to our comprehensive plan. I pulled the 2 pages of our comp plan out that talk about housing affordability, have some of the numbers from that. So, and I updated those numbers. So in the comprehensive plan, it says that The median household income in San Marcos is $26,000 for the overall city, with 20% of all households having an income less than $10,000 per year. That number, we have increased our median household income to $27,000, not by a very substantial amount. It's actually by about $500. And the Texas average, that's the blue numbers up there. So the average for the state of Texas for that number is 52,000. So that's pretty significant. One of the things we looked at as well is what is our median age compared to the median age in Texas. Our median age is 23. The median age in Texas is 33. We've also looked at the census puts out another number where they look at, so households includes single people as well. That's a household. The census also puts out a number that talks about families. So they say, you know, what's the median income for a family? For that, in San Marcos, we're at about 45, whereas Texas is closer to 65. So those are significant numbers here in San Marcos. Poverty rate for the city is 36.9%. That's gone up to 37.1%. This is just in the 4 years since our last comp plan, or since the census data has been redone since the last comp plan. This is the big one, huge one, the median contract rent per unit. Since the comp plan was done, it was 644. It's gone up now to 919 as the median rent. And that is actually more than the average for the state of Texas, which is 870. So our median household income is much lower, whereas our rents are actually higher. Same thing when we look at the median housing value. It's the same thing. So our median housing value is at 134. It's gone up pretty significantly in the last 4 years, and we're still higher than the average for the state of Texas. This is another pretty significant number that I found. We looked at renter occupied versus owner occupied, and you look at that little bar chart there, the state of Texas would actually flip it. So where we have 60%, 72% renter occupied, the state of Texas has 37%, and for owner-occupied housing, we have about 27% of our housing is owner-occupied, whereas the state of Texas is up at 62. Those were most of the really significant numbers in terms of the change between when the comp plan was done and now. I did put in here some of the changes in the types of housing units. One thing I thought was interesting, I don't think it's real statistically relevant just because this data set starts to get pretty small. But one of the things that we noticed is that the only types of housing that have actually increased are attached single family and housing with 2 to 4 units. So that's one of the things that we're talking about tonight. The number of, in terms of when you look at the types of housing units within the city out of overall housing units, those percentages, it's not a huge significant difference, but, and then we also looked at the age of housing units within the city, which is pretty much as to be expected, just over a 4-year period, not a lot of change. So that sort of sums this up. I'll keep those over there for our panel discussion. And so I wanted to just real quickly go ahead and introduce our panel and tell you a little bit about them, and then I've got a question for each panel member. So Sean Garretson, he is an economic development and land strategist and planner, and has also worked a lot on the Chicone project, which is an affordable housing project in Austin. Adriana Cruz, you all know, is president of our Greater San Marcos Partnership, which is working to encourage economic growth in San Marcos. So she'll be able to provide some perspective about workforce housing and the type of housing that we need to support that economic development and growth. Jim Adams works with McCann Adams Studio. He's the president of McCann Adams Studio, an architect, an urban designer, and planner with experience in Mueller development, as well as he's also working with us on the city's transportation master plan. So appreciate you all being here. Brian is Brian Kelsey. working Civic Analytics. He's a principal and founder, he works on economic development research and a consulting firm. And he's also helping the city through the CodeSMTX process on some of our financial modeling that we're doing as part of this process. And I'll be talking to you a little bit more about that later on tonight as we get into the second phase. And Terry Mitchell, who is there. And Terry Mitchell is the president of Momark Development. He's also working on the Code Advisory Group for the City of Austin, and is also on the board for Metro Transit Authority Board. All right, so I also wanted to introduce Diane Miller, Civic Collaboration. She's been working with us all through this process on the code. She's been helping us with public events and other kind of engagement, and also supporting our work through the think tank. So,
yeah, thanks, Abby.
yes.
I may have missed it. Did you get our count?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, I'm sorry. I just did that for a second.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
Thank you. So I just wanted to say hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane. So real quickly, I just want to put the frame around the conversation we're going to have tonight so we know what to expect. What we're going to do, like Abby mentioned, is she's actually going to ask specific questions to each of the panelists. And they're going to have about 5 minutes to respond. And what we want to do is have you be thinking about 3 big questions as it relates to what you're hearing on these topics. So while you're listening, be thinking in terms of what excites you, what concerns you, and what's a big question. You can have more than one, but what's a big question for you? So you'll see in front of you are yellow sticky notes in front of each of your seats. So keep in your mind those questions, because at the end what we want to do, after they've shared for about 5 minutes each, what we're going to do is have you actually take a 5 minute, or you can do it while you're hearing folks present, and fill out 1 sticky per item, or one comment per sticky, but you can have multiple comments. What are you hearing that excites you? What concerns you? Put number 1 at the top for what excites you, number 2, what concerns you, and then 3 is where we'll focus our time in the remaining about 45 minutes that we have with folks about what big questions do you have. And the reason that we're doing this, because there's so much we want to cover, and we want to understand your perspectives about the topic that you're hearing, and we want the panelists to be able to see kind of the whole, see the themes that are emerging for you with regard to the questions you have. So then we'll go into about 40 minutes of Q&A at that portion. So question per panelist that Abby will ask, we'll have you reflect on these 3 things, you'll jot down some thoughts, and then we'll look at what are those big questions that emerge. Does that make sense? All right. So if you want to earn my question. Put your hand up.
All right, so,
Here, let's do this. Yeah.
all right, so Adriana, wanted to start with you. What type of, as San Marcos continues to grow and attract new types of employers, what are the needs that you're seeing now and into the future for housing?
So we've been fortunate the past couple of years. We've seen some significant job growth in the city of San Marcos with some new employers. We developed that from a strategic plan, an economic development plan that we put into place, started 2016, that we call Vision 2020. And just to remind, oops, I'm going to go ahead and myself. Just to remind everyone, the strategy identified 5 areas that we needed to work on and improve and continue to develop in order for our city's economy to grow, as well as the surrounding area. And in addition to optimizing our talent base and recruiting new employers and helping our local businesses grow and entrepreneurs, was place. That quality of place question, and housing plays a big role in that. And so one of the things we're hearing from employers is a need for diversity in housing, and of course, the affordability question in housing. We do hear from employers, a lot of our employees are not living in the city of San Marcos because inventory is low. So the ability to have some additional inventory, some of the things we heard from employers like Epic Piping They were hiring students from Gary Job Corps to do the welding jobs that they had, and the students didn't have good credit, and so they weren't able to sign a lease for an apartment. So Epic Piping went looking for apartments and decided to co-sign leases for their employees, which is a wonderful thing for an employer to do. We do also hear from employers like CTMC who have a hard time recruiting in doctors to live here because there just isn't a lot of inventory. It's not that people don't want to live here. This is a very desirable place to live. It's just that sometimes the inventory isn't there. So that's one of the things that we hear. Our role in the partnership is not to attract housing development. That is not our job. Our focus is on primary sector job creation, so that our residents can have good paying jobs, that they can take care of their families and grow our regional economy. Within the Vision 2020 strategy, some of the things it talks about us doing collaboratively is for us to promote information on housing developments in San Marcos and make sure that we communicate information on new and upcoming developments in San Marcos. So we do that. And then, of course, working with the city on regulatory issues regarding higher density mixed use types, and working on the code. So we've sat down with the city staff a number of times, looking at those employment centers. What are they going to look like? Looking at where these activities are going to take place in the city, and we're thrilled to be working with city staff on this issue. This is an important issue. As we look at the economic development process and our goal to increase the per capita income of all our residents, some of the things that companies look for when they're looking in an area, in addition to infrastructure and talent, is where are their people going to live? So housing is one of the components that a company will look for when they're looking at a community. So we want to be sure that we have that diversity of our housing stock and increase that supply. And I think that's it for my answer.
Thank you so much. All right, next we'll move to Brian. And so, Brian, with your experience in economic development, how does diverse housing really relate to the economic development?
That's a great question. So what we do, and I'll just introduce it just briefly because I think they go a long way to explaining my answer for this. We're a research shop. We're not really a typical planning shop. We don't help people figure out what sort of developments they want. Our job is to help people understand the numbers and the trade-offs in their choices they make in the planning atmosphere. Economic development's funny. I used to work at the Council of Governments. I imagine you're familiar with that. And I moved here in 2005, and I used to hear people, when they were talking about the region, they would say, there's Austin, and then we have all these suburban communities, and they would start naming them off. And I could always tell if people had just moved to the region because they would include San Marcos as a suburban community of Austin. And what that said to me is that they weren't really all that familiar with the region, because San Marcos for a long time, the way I've always characterized it is, you are a self-sustaining city. And this is not a suburban community that is so closely tied to one of the larger cities to your north and south that you can almost just kind of ride the wave of growth in those other places. This is very much a city that's outside the context of anything I would ever call a suburb, and as such, you all have to decide what you really think economic development is. And for me, I've always answered that question. I kind of teach at the University of Texas Austin in the planning school, teach a class on economic development. We spend a lot of time with the students going through this. And the best, Sean probably talk about this a little bit too, but the best answer I've come up with after doing this for about 16 years is it's really about choice. This phrase, quality of place, I've never really liked too much because it's a little squishy. I don't know that choice is any less squishy, but for me, as an economic development person, the goal should always be, if we're trying to attract new employers, we're trying to grow existing employers. Are they going to be able to find the workers they need, and will those workers want to live in your community? And you can't micromanage people's lives. Everybody wants a different kind of lifestyle. Everybody, some people want to rent, some people want to own, some people want small efficiencies, some people want larger detached single family. For me, an economic development goal around housing has to be choice. And I think that's what you all are trying to do with this code enhancement, is inject a little bit of predictability, put some numbers to it that can allow people to make informed trade-offs about the different development types, different building forms in those development types. And then really, I think, empower your economic development staff. And by the way, you have one of the best ones in the state of Texas here. I'm sure you all already know that, but it's true. To really enhance and probably maximize choice on behalf of those workers who are going to be taking those jobs that you guys are growing. And this is exactly the kind of exercise you need to go through in order to really do that.
Great, thank you. Pull up some other slides here. Next question. Sean. All right, Sean. What's your experience on the Chicone project? What were some of the key elements that helped that affordable housing project really come to fruition?
Okay, so a little bit of background on myself, my knowledge of San Marcos. I actually was on a team that helped put together the downtown master plan, which was great. And so when we're trying to win other projects and they ask that question of what's an example of a successful project where they implemented the plan, I always point to San Marcos. And so I applaud you guys for going through this effort, and I know you're going to take this information and actually do something about it. I didn't know there was dinner here tonight, so we actually went to Craft House, which was actually the building on a corner, became what used to be the building on the corner, and it's great to see what you guys have done. So I am a planner and a developer, and I really have modeled my development career after this gentleman on the end here, Terry Mitchell, who is really a developer who puts his money where his mouth is when it comes to this issue. But on the affordability side, so I volunteer as a board president for an organization in Austin called the Chestnut Neighborhood Revitalization Corporation. We're a 501c3. We've built several single-family affordable houses. We've built a 22-unit senior affordable housing project, and we're in the process right now of developing this project called the Chicone, which is ultimately it's going to be 43-unit. Let's see. One advances, there it is. It's going to be 3 buildings, 43 units overall, and of those 43, 33 are going to be affordable to people making less than 80% of the median family income. That's an important number for you to understand, because when HUD looks at San Marcos and what your 80% MFI is, they look at the MSA, so that includes Travis and Hays County. For a single person family, which is just a one-person household, that's $43,000 a year, which is already $2,000 less than what your average median family income is in San Marcos. So on this one, we have 3 buildings. Each building has approximately 13 units. Most of them are affordable to those making less than 80% of median family income. And then the ground floor is commercial. So one of the things I don't think that you have here are CHODOs, community housing development organizations. I think you have maybe a housing finance organization or something similar to that. It's, I think, an interesting opportunity for you to try and foster that here. This is just that chart. It's an older chart of median family income. As you can see, that for a single person at that time, it was $41,000. 2-person household, it's $48,000. So this project is in East Austin, right just north of the intersection of Chicone and 12th Street. So we bought 3 properties with the help of the city. And this is one of the things, and I know Brian can relate to it, there's an economic term called market failure. Affordable housing, in my opinion, is a classic market failure. It's not something that the private sector will address without public subsidy. So, Austin, whether or not you hate them or love them, and I understand this city is one that doesn't always love Austin, is that our voters have actually voted for 2 really large affordable housing bonds. We recognize that as a community benefit. So that's just one of the things I want to put out to you. This is what the area looked like when we were first starting to develop it. And I'll show you some pictures of what we're looking at now. One of the big issues really for this, and relates to your code, is we have compatibility setbacks from single family housing for these areas along the corridor. That drove up our commercial costs significantly because we had to go 25 feet from the setback. And then we had to do what's called a podium construction building, which is basically concrete, including the first level, or the floor level of the second story. Big increase in cost. These are what the drawings are kind of look like, and we're about halfway through the development of it right now. We've pre-sold everything. For the smallest unit, it's 144,000, and it's about a 700 square foot unit. So you can do that math, which sounds expensive, but in that part of East Austin, most new houses are going for $400 a square foot. So it's significantly reduced. And the overall cost of the project is about $12 million. This will be a sticker shock to you. The subsidy that we're getting from the city is about $3 million. So it's about a 1-to-4 ratio. When we first started to do this project, we wanted to do rental. And we went to the neighborhood because we needed some variances. And they said, hell no, you want variances? I'm sorry, it's the city council meeting, I can't say that word, apologies. They said, if you want a variance, you're gonna have to do owner occupied because we don't trust that the rental people will be good neighbors. And so, I actually met with our land development code folks that are going through the code next in Austin, and they wanted to debrief on everything, and I told them I would never advise the city to subsidize owner occupied affordable housing. It is incredibly difficult, and it's gonna take a lot of the subsidy. Rental is a different project. The last thing I'll say is, this is a private development I'm doing in Elgin, which similar in terms of, obviously not size, but it's way out of Austin, but it's an agrarian development. And the last thing I'm gonna say on this is, when you look at affordability, it's not just housing, it's housing, transit, food, and daycare. Through this, we're actually creating a co-op, and we're capturing new market tax credits, because it's an eligible new market tax credit area. You can use new market tax credits on housing if you're providing aging in place and if you're providing some level of affordability. I've looked at the new market tax credit map. San Marcos has several areas for that. That's all I'll say. I think I'm over at time. Thank you.
All right. The next question is for Terry. What type of regulatory environment best supports the construction of diverse and affordable housing? And I've got some slides for you. If you just go to the next one, there's some slides there that you had said.
Just a couple of thoughts. I operate in the space. I'm doing one affordable for sale project, and it's 3 times harder than anything else I ever do. And for every, you got to qualify them while you're waiting to build a home for them. They may lose their qualification. It's a challenge. We're averaging about 4 a month. Our pro forma said 8 a month, so we get a picture of how it's being stretched out. It's a process, and I'll be very proud of the community when it's done, but it's very hard. I want to make a comment. When we talk about affordability, I'm not talking about some legal definition of 60 or 80 or whatever, but just affordability in general. When you start getting down into the lower price points, it's never free. I just want to make that statement. Even if in Austin, the Cadillac standard for affordable housing is a company called Foundation Communities, and they do 1 or 2 new tax credit deals every year, and every one of you, in some infinitesimally small way, subsidizes that project because you pay more in taxes because IBM or Bank of America or somebody buys this tax credit and doesn't pay taxes on it. And so we, the rest of us, end up funding the federal government because they're buying tax credits that those funds are then used in affordable housing. It's the largest provider of affordable housing in the country, but understand it's subsidized. It's not free. The second thing is Austin does, like Austin's issued $130 million worth of bonds, and those are direct subsidies in there. And then the third way is, especially if it's mandated, in Austin you see these things where you're asking for approvals and they'll say, we'll give you X number of additional units, but we want 5% of the units to be affordable or 10% of the units to be affordable. you do that, what happens is that the residents that are paying the market rate in that community, they subsidize. Because the developer to go get, people like Sean and I go out to find investors, and it doesn't matter whether you're Sean Garretson, Terry Mitchell, D.R. Horton, Pulte, you have investors ultimately back there, and they expect a return. If you don't hit those returns, the money doesn't happen. So if you can raise your prices to your other owners a little bit to cover that subsidy, that's what you have to do. So my point is just to understand that concept. Now, that's the way it's done most. I try to provide a housing is people like me around, but we try to provide housing for what I would say the bulk of our society. It's not trying to get to the lowest low, it's not trying to get to the highest high, but everybody in this room saving except maybe 10% on the upper end, 10% on the bottom end. The rest of you, I'm happy to tell you, kind of thing. That's the way it works. And the way housing prices have been escalating nationwide, Texas, California, Jim's originally from San Francisco, you name it, housing prices have been rising far more dramatically than incomes. And so this challenge is getting worse and worse everywhere. And the only tools that I have done, now we go to the next slide. The only way that I can, I've just talked about that, the only way I can get the prices down is to increase the density. Think of it as a single family home, and I then put a duplex on that lot as opposed to a single family home. I've cut that land cost in half. If I do a triplex, then I cut that land in thirds, if that makes any sense. So that's and then I also invariably, the units begin to get smaller, and we try to live smaller. By the way, the average square footage of a home in 1959 in the United States, 900 square feet. Today it's 23 to 2,600, depending on who's telling you what it is. And so sometimes it's our expectations that have changed. But I'll talk a little bit about a duplex. And this is the presentation that I gave in Austin and RCLCO used at Denver at a presentation. But it's basically saying taking a lot, dividing it into, and you divide the land cost, and then the cost per construction above is the same, generally speaking. And so you lower the price of the home because you put more units on it. Then go on to the next one. You do triplexes, as your example, at the lower right. I built about 300 of those in my former company. And we tried to make them, we had other elevations. That was actually a model where we could take off and change the facades. But those are 3 units there. And we tried to make it look residential so you could put it along the street and people would drive by and not know it's a triplex, but in fact thought it was a house. Fourplexes, the same sort of deal. Now you're dividing it by 4. These are examples from various parts of the country. I'm sorry, now we go to a 6plex. Sometimes those get larger. I wish I had a couple of pictures there's some in Pittsburgh, for example, that look like a 4,000 square foot home and there's 6 units. It's really, really amazing. Go on to 11 to 14 units an acre. The lower right is about a little over 12 units an acre. The left is about 12 units an acre. Just different ways of doing it where it feels residential in character, but you're putting the units closer together, you're making them smaller. Townhomes are typically 8 to 12 units an acre. That's another way to accomplish that. And then small apartment buildings, not creating the big, massive, buildings that run along for, a long distance and very high, but trying to put it in incremental little areas. I have a daughter that goes to school in Boston, and so she's an architecture major, so we have a lot in common. And so we walked about 4 communities this last week, and it's just amazing. And I've got probably 100 pictures going, I wish I could build that in Austin, I wish I could build that in Austin, I wish I could build that in Austin, because it implemented a lot of these designs. But these are tools that I want to put in my toolbox where I can begin to reach a broader group of people, because the way we're doing it now is serving less and less of our population.
Thanks, Jerry. Good. You can, set you up, Jim, with a new one. But Jim, your question is, what elements of the development code are needed to ensure that diverse housing fits in well with its surrounding or its existing neighborhoods?
As he's pulling it up, I want to remind the council members, so we want to be getting questions, what excites you, some thoughts, what concerns you, and what's your big question, that's the one we'll focus on, that we can be taking some of those notes now to answer these questions.
Would you state these long questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, so this one is, what elements of the development code are needed to ensure that diverse housing fits in well with its surrounding or its existing neighborhoods?
So I think all of the other panelists have answered this in one way or too, but I think the code certainly needs to support a diverse range of housing types that can fit into a neighborhood context. And we're in Austin, as you probably all know, are in the process of updating our land development code as well. And I've been working on the Miller redevelopment, the redevelopment of the old airport for 20 years now. And it's being used as an example of the kinds of things that might be able to be done in the new code, because many of the housing types that we have done with Miller are not permissible under the existing land development code, not unlike what Abby was talking about yours as well. And, you know, in Austin, we have lots of single-family homes and we have lots of apartment buildings, but there is nothing much in between, and that's what we've been calling the missing middle, the housing types that are between the single-family house and the larger apartment building. And these are the types of buildings that Terry showed in some of his pictures that you see in older neighborhoods, in the pre-war neighborhoods, duplexes, triplexes, courtyard housing that fit in very nicely in a neighborhood context, but you don't see that much anymore after, you know, in the post-war neighborhoods. And they're really ideal for creating neighborhoods and places where people can age in place, where young people can afford to live, and you can create a real diversity of housing types. So we've been working very hard at Miller to try to create such a neighborhood where we have lots of single-family houses, but we also have a whole range of different building types, some of which are really small lots. All this dilemma of housing affordability that Terry really articulated very well, we are chasing our tails. At Miller, we are obligated, because it's a city-owned piece of land. I think the other strategy that cities can take is to leverage their ownership in pieces of publicly owned land to create affordability. We are obligated, the developer is obligated to provide 25% of all of the units here to be affordable to folks earning less than 80% of median family income if they're owning, and then 60% of median family income if they're renting. What I'm going to talk to you about now are the different ownership building types that we've included in here. And over the years, we've had to come up with new building types because of the affordability escalation. I mean, the appreciation of housing types. And the units are getting smaller and smaller. You know, moving up from the single-family house, we have garden court cottages that are oriented to a little open space, pocket parks. These are inserted right in the middle of neighborhoods. They work ideally because they create pockets of open space that the entire neighborhood can use, great for children, small families. The lots are quite small, smaller than a typical single-family unit. Carriage houses, we started out saying that you could have a carriage house if you had a large single-family lot. We're now including carriage houses on virtually every lot, every detached lot. They're very popular rental units, as well as the classic mother-in-law condition. We've developed zero lot line houses. There's a real desire for people to own their own house independent of an attached situation. These lots are 26 feet wide and 60 feet deep. They've been very popular, located in, you know, along the sales and along the streets. Of course, row houses, these are 21 feet wide and 50 to 90 feet deep, pretty small, but they all line the streets. We've developed shop houses, and these have been very challenging because of our building codes, but where you have a ground level commercial space and an upper level residential space, the building code requires that the same owner, resident, same commercial tenant be the owner of the residential unit. We have now been developing smaller and smaller unit types. This is a garden court of attached homes. These are on lots that are some of 17 feet wide by 60 feet deep. And then ones that are now under construction, sale row houses that are on 40-foot deep lots by 15-foot wide depths. At Miller, every single house has to have 2 cars. It's part of our zoning code. So in this situation, we have parking courts and a single car garage within the building. Parking is a real challenge. It's expensive to provide, it drives the cost of the house up, and that's one of the real challenges. Just as Terry showed in some of the older neighborhoods, we also have 4- and 6-plex houses that try to appear like single-family homes, so you'll see those along different avenues within the area. So the range of densities go all the way from 10 or 8 units to the acre for the single-family house up to 30 BUs per acre. And most of these, except for the 6-plexes, are fee simple for-sale housing units. So a real diversity. Now, we mix these all in together, but it's really important that your code have rules about how these can live with each other. Certainly the rule of how you deal with a car is critical, and I know that you've dealt with that in your code. How the buildings face the street and what their common elements are, porches, stoops. The building elevated off the street is really important. We need to provide accessibility to the unit. At Miller, we're doing that through the garage. But because the units are so close to the street, it's important that they not be right down flush with the sidewalk, so that people walking along the sidewalk aren't looking right into your house. So we've developed a whole series of kind of form-based rules that establish how these buildings can really coexist. And we have areas where some are located, and some can be located, and some can't. But I think it has been very successful in that we have houses that are selling for $100,000, $150,000, I think, next to houses that are selling for $1 million. So it shows that you can design neighborhoods with that kind of diversity.
So yeah, so council members, if you take a minute and generate your thoughts, we're just gonna, it seems unusual, we'll take a quiet minute, write down just maybe one sticky about what excites you, one about what concerns you, and I'm gonna pull this flip chart up, and this is the what's a big question for you based on what you've heard. Then we're gonna see what themes have emerged and ask the panel to respond. Yeah, I'm going to actually read out the questions, and we'll get a sense for the themes, and then the panel can kind of look at the whole picture of what you're asking. We'll leave it open for as more questions emerge. Just a second. Just real quick, I'm gonna actually read these out just so the attendees have a sense for this too. Excited about an increase in the median household income, even as the population has grown. There are options to address our concerns. There are solutions available, with an exclamation. Finally getting closer to implementation. Those are excited. Concerns, creating rentals in neighborhoods and having them filled with students instead of families, younger professionals, and elderly. Concerns about volume of currently entitled housing units that have not been developed and the increased cost of housing, as well as our need for public safety investments for current and future. Concern, form-based code. Concern, how, given our history of neighborhoods being converted from owner-occupied to rental units, how do we develop a consensus that allows for a diversity of housing? And how to do this in a college town where investors buy affordable housing for rentals, right? So this is the reality of the situation in San Marcos. So here's some specific questions. Actually, They fall into pretty three distinct buckets for y'all, so these are pretty different questions. One is, what are the projections of workforce migration to San Marcos from surrounding communities and its impact on the increase in the poverty rate? So it's a question about who's coming here and what are the implications. Here's a question about how do we balance the needs to create solutions to affordability with the concerns of supplying an investor-funded student housing solution. So you're seeing concerns reflected. Specific question for you. Future zonings, how, when? Okay, so I'm not sure if this panel can address that, but that's a question. What else we got? So who wants to, so we've got these big buckets of questions. This question about migration from folks in other communities. Terry.
I think as a general statement, there is a strong pressure for there's some conflicting views, but generally speaking, there is a strong pressure to push housing out of the core of our metropolitan area. You're doing a project in Elgin, your great little agrarian community. You didn't put it in Austin because you couldn't make it. So that's a movement out to cause that to happen. You're seeing that. I'm working on a project in San Marcos, Kyle, that's 2,000 units, a village that will try to implement a lot of these different housing types in a much denser setting, therefore being able to push the price down, and by putting 2,000 units there, being able to add the services and stuff to make it walkable, et cetera. But I couldn't do that in Austin, so I'm moving out to do that. The second reason for out-migration is that traffic is a little bit of a problem. You will see over the next 20 years an out-migration of jobs. You're going to see an out-migration of people wanting to locate further from the core. Austin, by the way, just as a side note, Austin's central core has the highest concentration of jobs as a percentage of its total job base of any large city in the country. 29% of all jobs are located within a 3-mile radius of the center of the city. And that's a heavy, heavy concentration, which creates the tremendous traffic problems that Austin is dealing with because people are living out here and trying to get to work. Employers are beginning to wake up and say, hey, I can go to the domain. Hey, I can go to other places and be able to locate. Cedar Park and Leander, their employment growth is on fire, I was told today, because of that out-migration where people don't have to commute anymore. So if I were counseling San Marcos, I would say, you're not only going to get people moving here because of affordability, you're also going to get people moving here because you'll see jobs follow.
So the out-migration question is one that we identified when we did the Vision 2020 strategy. San Marcos has been ranked as the fastest growing city in the country for 3 years in a row by the Census Bureau, based on a percent growth change year over year. This wasn't the case last year, but for the prior 3 years to that. When we went in and looked at the source of that population growth, we found, the firm that did the economic development strategy found that it was due primarily to in-migration, primarily from Travis County. There are some other locations, Harris County, Houston area, a couple of Florida counties, I think some California counties, but primarily Travis County. And I think it is that issue, as Terry mentioned. One is, it's expensive to live in Austin, and the second is that as traffic becomes more and more challenging in Austin, people want to live further away. We also did an analysis on the demographics of this population coming in, and 30% of that population coming into Hays County, we don't know that it's City of San Marcos specific, but 30% of them are at the poverty line. So our poverty rate is increasing as a county and as a city. That is an issue that we are trying to address through jobs, through bringing in some higher paying jobs, providing training opportunities, workforce training, so that these people can have their skills upgraded so that they can then qualify for better paying jobs.
Just real quickly, I think what both Terry and Adriana said is right on. Also, New Braunfels is a new client of ours, and we were actually over there today. We're doing their economic development strategy and working on their comprehensive plan. They just did a 3-hour bus tour, and I had no idea all the multifamily that's being built off the interstate. And they just got the new HEB on this side, and they specifically said because they want to pull the sales tax revenue out of San Marcos, because their residents on the north side are coming up here. My point that I'm trying to get to is that I feel like you all, if you haven't done the analysis, you need to really dig into what really is the demand for affordability, who needs it, and maybe Brian already did that as part of the work he's doing here right now, but I know in Austin at the time they did that, they hired a group out of Denver, and they found that the biggest demand, they came to the exact number of units was those people making 80 to 120% of median family income. And for Austin, that's really, that's kind of that missing gap of housing. The other thing is senior affordable housing. We have a huge wait list in Austin for senior affordable housing. And the final thing, and I'll pass it over to Brian, is that affordability has such a tarnished name to it, and it's a shame because you see some great affordable housing products that can be right next to or within a single-family development, and you would never know. It's about providing a quality of design and a quality of housing. And I lied, Brian. There's one other thing that you guys should consider, and it's the opportunity that didn't come up here, and that's creating a land trust. I know Jim knows a lot about that with Miller, and that's something that we've done with the Chicon. And it's a way to preserve that level of affordability in perpetuity. And you can do income restrictions. Like Brian was saying earlier, I think you said student housing is a protected class, or students are a protected class. You have to be careful about how you kind of go about that. But anyway, I see some council members shaking their head.
I want to flip this question a little bit and frame it more as an opportunity. The two Abby's slide with the data showed, I believe, a 10% inflation-adjusted annual increase in the median rent over the last 4 years, and barely any movement in owner-occupied housing prices. You look around the country, you are not going to find a lot of cities with that particular set of circumstances growing this fast. And for me, as an economic development person, that immediately jumps out at me, because while a lot's been made about the differences in millennials and younger people, and they want different things, and none of them are going to own a car, and they don't want to buy a house, a lot of that I think is overblown, and it's just a factor of people are having kids later, they're making those kinds of decisions later, they may or may not get married. If they do, it's usually later. Now, you guys have a prime opportunity here as younger people age into those kinds of decisions to really look at a more diverse mix of owner-occupied housing types. Because what I do think is different about millennials is they do want choice. They all don't want that yard to take care of. They all don't want that traditional detached 10,000 square foot lot, single family. They want to own, or they will want to own is my bet. But they want choice, and they want different lifestyle options within that ownership category. So I'm looking at this stuff, and I mean, it's a huge opportunity right now, because you're basically able to provide that affordable owner-occupied, if you do it right, that a lot of other cities are now going back and trying to retrofit. It's hugely problematic for those other cities.
Abby, would you mind pulling up my presentation again? And there's a slide on there with data. One that I kind of skipped over real quickly for time, but it looks at not only our median income, it's like slide 4, yeah. It compares not just, your slide compared San Marcos to Texas, and we went ahead and added in Hays County and the Austin MSA. The household income, the family income, our median age, of course we're younger. The median home value, $134,800 compared to $175 in the county, $196 for the MSA, and $131 in Texas. However, we have reported by the Four Rivers Realty Association, the median price that's actually being purchased in our area is $219,000. So the inventory that we have at that lower level is pretty much taken. So there is nothing available at that level, but what's available is at a higher price point. So I think you're right, there is a lot of opportunity for that sort of more diverse mix, for that young professional population that we want to keep here and employ, and for other, for a diverse population.
So I know, having worked with the community for a while now, I do want to hit on this question about balancing the needs of creating a solution to affordability with the concerns of supplying an investor-funded student housing solution. So the whole question about, student housing and how to really create that balance and create those opportunities. It seems like an important tension in San Marcos. What would some of you think about this issue of student housing?
Can we ask any questions when the council's speaking?
Yeah, well, let me do this. All right, yes, I think that'd be a great idea. But let me tell you what one other question landed up here. It said, how do we address inventory since we've approved or incentivized 8,800 square foot, help me, 8,800 as single family, there we go, single family lots in the past 4 years. So how do we address inventory since we've approved or incentivized 8,800 single family lots in the past 4 years? So just to put that context out there, that's the other question out there. So they're keen on this question around student housing. Thoughts?
Okay, I'm not a lawyer and I don't have the solution, but it would seem to me, notwithstanding that they are students are protected classes,
Jim, hold it closer so
that if there was a way of de-restricting properties so that the owner has to occupy the unit, you might be able to reduce the number of investor approaches where they're buying up lots of units just to rent out to students. And that's something that we've done at Miller because we want to make sure that there is owner occupation for at least a certain period of time. That's one thing. The other thing is HOAs can play a positive role in terms of regulating behavior in neighborhoods, and those are two strategies that might be able to help.
Can you repeat the first one?
The first one was, deed restrictions to require owner occupation of a unit rather than investors coming in and just buying up units to rent to students.
Let me ask a question. I've done a student housing project years ago and have been involved. We live in Austin. We sort of have some student housing in and around the university as well. Is it an accurate statement to say that the great majority of student issues with rentals is that they're in single family or duplex type of developments, meaning not large, not this particular multifamily project over here that's so-and-so student housing project, but is it mostly having to do with what I call the onesies, twosies, 1 to 10, or is it everything?
It's everything right now.
It is both of them.
I think what happens is you've got the investors coming in and they're targeting the single family duplexes, fourplexes, and before they get even in the market for a young professional couple, they've gotten bought up by investors that go to college towns and basically do that for a living. So it's just getting affordable housing and keeping it on the market for the young professional. I mean, I think we all agree with everything every one of you have said, but how do we deliver that affordable housing when it gets bought up before it's market? That's our problem. And whether they're in the neighborhoods or not, most students are pretty good in our neighborhoods. I don't think that's the problem, is having the availability, really.
Good to know.
do you want to hear about or add to the question and then?
I'd just like to suggest that, I know that you look at the rental numbers here, a lot of that number is driven by the rent of the bedroom, those type of numbers. That always our minimum house price. And when we have a house that's here, we do have a maximum of 2 unrelated per household. That is a compliance issue that we're having to find as well. But if you put 2 $900 students in a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom home, that makes it a pretty viable investment. So that really takes the price of our lower price, our workforce housing, anything that's in that range category of, let's say, $220,000 or below, that's prime target for, and there's people lined up to make investments, like you say. So they're ready to buy them and make a rental property. So that's a dilemma we face to deliver that product and have it be available to our young professionals or workforce families.
Do you want to add this?
Yeah, and the owner-occupied may not help because we have a lot of parents. We're buying houses, you got 3 kids coming through college, and going back to that restriction that you're talking about only applies in the single-family neighborhoods. But if they've got able to get 2 brothers in at the same time and a 3rd roommate, that's legit. So we see that, and as that goes through, again, the houses are just, they're not affordable for young families.
I saw you.
I just wanted to say too that since our student population is willing to pay $900 a bedroom and such, it is artificially raising our rental prices. So that's a huge issue for us, is that artificial inflation. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas about that.
You know, I was just going to say, I finally sold my house in East Austin. I've been there for about 15 years, and I moved to a house that is just north of UT, and off 35th and Guadalupe. I was just telling Brian that. It's great, I can walk to everything, but all around me, these amazing houses, and they're all being used in the same way that you are. And mine's the only driveway that only has 1 car in it, you know. But I think it's incredibly difficult for you guys to deal with that private sector issue, because that's exactly what it is, unless you want to get very aggressive about it. And what does that mean? It means utilizing every tool that is at your disposal. I mean, CDBG funds, floating a bond for affordability, and purchasing lands, working and helping to create nonprofit affordable housing organizations that, not necessarily on your behalf, but with their mission being, they go out and try and buy some of those houses, maybe using some subsidies with the city. I mean, that's not something you guys have done. It's something that we have done in Austin, and East Austin is definitely one of those markets where it's experiencing what you're experiencing right now too, but it's like Terry said, I mean, affordable housing is not free. That money's got to come from somewhere. But there's a lot of creative sources for that funding. New market tax credits, CDBG funding, lots of other HUD funding, bond funding. So.
And I'll just say from an employer's perspective, for those that are here growing, for those that are looking to come into our area, Texas State University is a huge asset because that's the workforce pipeline. And having those students graduate, stay here, go to work, live here, raise their families, become members of the community is something that will benefit us in the long run. It's something that they want. But I think that price, that median home price, is reflective of the fact that the houses that young families or young professionals could afford to buy, if they so chose to buy it, are not available because they're being purchased. And I've heard this, that price point from $130 to $200 are purchased for rentals, for students. The parents buy it for their kids who are coming to Texas State and so on. So part of that diversity of the housing available inventory is that more of those starter homes, more of the professional level multifamily or nicer multifamily, not so much student housing. The university continues to grow and will continue to grow. Their focus now is growing the graduate school program. So that's a different type of student demographic. They're older students, they're in the graduate school programs, they're getting their masters, their PhDs, some of them may be married. So it's a different, we're gonna see, I think, over the years, a different type of demographic, but it is still something that we'll need in terms of housing diverse options.
One of the things I would say too is that the university itself probably has to take some responsibility for providing more housing, in the vicinity of the campus. And one of the things that's happened in Austin, which is interesting, is that with the rezoning of land to immediately around the campus, the UNO plan, they've created a lot of apartments, higher density apartments, really oriented to students within walking distance of the campus. And that has removed the pressure for these kind of student ghettos that were occurring in other parts of Austin. And so I don't know how that relates exactly to San Marcos or whether you have those types of opportunities to promote higher density housing immediately adjacent to the university, but that could reduce some of the pressure that you're seeing in the neighborhood.
Well, one question here that we didn't touch on yet is, it's not really a question, but it's framed around how developers and investors being part of an increase in public transportation. So basically transportation equals jobs, equals income, equals housing, kind of that convergence of people's mobility needs and people's housing needs. So actually I wonder, Terry, if you might address that a little bit, because you've been on Capital Metro in Austin as well as the Code Advisory Group.
When you connect jobs and transportation and services and housing, that is sort of the nexus of what people want, whether they articulate it or not, and those become the most desirable places. And so you're seeing that in Austin, the areas that are getting that are driving up the prices. But it's also, if we be intentional about it, we can make it better. And so there are ways, there are some companies that you used to see in California, we used to practice law in California. In my law firm, I worked in downtown LA, and we had employees, probably about 100 or so, but we had 4 to 5 vans that would come from different areas of the metropolitan area and bring people into the downtown. And it was a way, it was for the law firm, it was a wash cost for the employee to actually save money because they didn't have to pay for parking. And so it was what the employer did was subsidize the rental of the van and the payment for the gasoline, and the people were able to come in and not have to run a place to park their car. It does work. I think personally that the best tool we have, what I'm trying to do, is develop housing where services are and where jobs are or will be. Because over the long term, when you've got a 2-minute commute, you don't have traffic problems. So it is something that we want to do. I will say this, and I think the code and the folks have been talking about it. I used to be a skeptic about people using alternative forms of transportation. You know, I grew up, my dad was a car guy, you know, I'm a car guy. We had, you know, my brother and I, have this little competition going on who has the coolest car and all this sort of stuff. But when I look at my 7 employees that work for my company, 3 of them ride their bike to work. We just moved offices, and so the key decision, far more than economics, far more than anything, was it accessible so that they could continue to ride their bikes to work? And there's bathrooms in there, 2 bathrooms with showers, and they don't the girls can sweat in the shower, but the rest of it, so they're encouraging me to want to start riding a bike, and I'm 61 years old and I'm thinking about riding my bike to work because I can combine exercise and I don't have to bike to traffic. And so there is a change going on here, and I don't have answers on it, just flip a switch. Let me give you a little bit about Capital Metro. Capital Metro has struggled for several years because you can either be a high frequency transit area serving where people really ride a lot, or you can try to cover the waterfront and be a very low frequency, trying to spread out. And what we have found out through consultants and paying a bunch of people's money is that when you put a bus out here that goes once every 30 minutes, you only get the folks that have no other form of getting around. If you put it in an area where you start having high frequency being defined as 10 minutes or less, people ride transit as a way of life, but they don't have to plan their trips anymore. If they walk out, they know that in 7 minutes or so, there's going to be a bus and they'll get on it or a train or whatever. And so Capital Metro is in the process of trying to transform its system so that it will then provide a higher frequency, give people alternatives.
Let me just make one more point about this occupancy limits and investor owned. conversions to student rentals. We did a report for the Austin City Council a couple years ago when they lowered the occupancy limits from 6 to 4 to 4 unrelated people. And what you're going to see is that as that median home value starts to creep up, you're going to see fewer. My hunch is that you're going to see fewer and fewer conversions to rentals, simply because housing in some markets where you've seen a similar situation, and you've seen it kind of tail off. What's happening is that housing has become so expensive that what people are doing are just buying it, tearing it down, and building what has affectionately become known as stealth dorms, which are these sort of 5 and 6 bedroom homes. And the only reason those really even exist is because the homes have gotten so expensive, and there was no way to make it pencil unless you were going to be able to cram 5 or 6 or 7 people in there, each paying rent, each having their own bedroom. So my guess is this notion of conversions to rentals is going to slow down as that price starts to go up, and you will start to probably get into things like teardowns. And I think what you're doing now is smart because you're injecting. This is kind of this whole environment's kind of a funny business to me because you're trying to inject some flexibility into an environment that craves predictability, and it's really difficult to do that well. What I encourage you to do is several cities have gone through this issue with people coming in, buying a traditional single-family detached, turning them into rentals, and there's a bunch of attention right now in Boulder and other cities on this occupancy limits issue. So what I encourage you to do is if somebody has some staff or somebody else has some time, not to create more work for Abby and her excellent staff, but look at other communities, not just Austin, not just other places in Texas, but actually other states, because I think there's some communities out there that you could probably get some good lessons learned from.
Thanks, Frank. So I kind of was tempted to end with a piece of advice, one piece of advice from each of you. I've got 2 council members that want to make a comment. It's about 2 minutes before 7.
Okay, one is that, I think we're still seeing investors come in and buy brand new homes, not conversion homes, brand new homes. And if you look at the numbers, $1,800, you can get about a 20% return on a $200,000+ home with an $1,800 rent, on 20% down. So the returns are still pretty good, and that's market returns for a house. The other question, Terry, I wanted to really ask, because we have different areas of the city, and I want to go back to the affordability question for just a minute. Downtown or our urban core parking issues, parking requirements. Would you talk about that and talk about how that impacts affordability and decisions about Washington?
Parking is a big issue, and it gets bigger the denser you get because then you're starting to build parking lots. So, at the same time, it's off. Let me give you one range. I was involved in the building of the sanctuary laws years ago at Civic. And we built 1 space per bedroom there. That's sort of the multifamily norm. In fact, I later said we won't finance it unless you do it. So we built it, and then it probably was 40% vacant because kids were coming to school without a car. There wasn't enough that they could walk. And so for me, as I go through an analysis, I try to understand who is going to be my buyer or my renter, and do they always bring a car with them? In downtown Austin, they don't. There's a good percentage of people who are renting, and they may be leaving their car at the office, or maybe they're getting rid of their car, but for whatever reason, they're not renting a rental space as a part of their rental apartment. So you have to sort of analyze it and say, and the key statistic there is, can they go to their work or school? Can they get their services? Can they do all those things without a car? And when you start seeing that, you start seeing them not come to property. It's a vague analysis, but it is a very big cost. I've done projects before. I'm doing a project right now that's not in downtown, it's right off downtown, and I actually have 34 extra parking spaces out of 182 units to sell because demand is always great. When people are, a couple is buying a 1 bedroom and they have 2 cars, and so I have to have some extra for them to buy. A mile into downtown, and you'll have people who are saying, I don't need a car, I want to pay for it. It's very, not as clear, there's no clear demarcation.
I just wanted to make a comment. Y'all can comment on it if you want to, but it seems to be one of the perennial issues that we face in San Marcos. And I was particularly interested in the discussion about the missing middle and the garden court homes and how you make houses live with each other. I thought that was all exactly where these are the questions that we need to get answered. What we generally will see is just a tremendous fear of, for instance, if you proposed a garden court home in some of our neighborhoods, it would be a real fight. Not because they don't want garden court homes, not because they don't like the way garden court homes look, not because it wouldn't be a good addition to the neighborhood, but just that fear that you've heard of it being bought by a nameless corporation in California that doesn't care about us at all. And we end up spending tens of thousands of dollars just to clean up all the discarded furniture after every semester. And so that is my question. I don't know if it can be answered. It's a tough one for us. It's the one thing that seems to be like the condominiums that you talked about and the townhomes. I mean, I have family that lives in a townhome and it's beautiful. It's one car garage. And that's where my mother lives in. It's a wonderful place for her, but there's such fear when you propose those here because of what we've seen happen in the past.
I think we'll end on that. We might be ending on that question. Want to keep us on time?
I just want to segue off of Councilman Garretson's comments about the reduction of parking downtown and how Austin does it. Because I think personally, I'd love to see 50-70% parking downtown. We are not in a city where people can access by plane, by bus. We're 30 miles south of Austin, north of San Antonio. How do we get people to San Marcos? And I think that's one of our biggest challenges is how do they get here to allow them that reduction in parking? Because once they get here, they can get around pretty good, hopefully a lot better soon. How do they get here?
I think it is very different than downtown Austin, because of what you're saying. But I think one thing that you can think about doing is trying to decouple parking from development. So if there was, in the downtown area, if there was more centralized parking where somebody who has an office building could buy into those parking spaces so that each development didn't have to provide its own parking. I think that is a very effective way of reducing the cost of development and then creating more efficient parking systems. So having an in-loop parking district in the downtown, so somebody, developer, could buy parking spaces from the city or from a parking entity, I think would be one strategy that you could consider.
Can we switch to Councilmember Tamani's question about this issue of this fear? What, and particularly those of you, Terry and Sean, perhaps, that have developed projects, kind of address kind of some of the concerns when change comes in. What piece of advice would you give? And we're going to wrap up on this response.
I'm not sure I've seen any city with the magnitude of the issue that you're facing. And I used to think Austin was dominated by student housing. It's not. Compared to but you are. Let me back it up.
Boulder, Santa Cruz, California, Boulder, Colorado, I think would be good examples. I know Santa Cruz is dealing with exactly the same issues.
Well, back to your issue too, kind of that, I think San Marcos should just take the bull by the horns and build Lone Star itself. Joking about that. Joking about that. Yeah, $2 billion. I think you guys, on the parking issue, you know, like in the Chicon is really close to the downtown, and it's on a bike route, it's on a bus route, and we are selling the parking spaces as premiums. And what we're finding is not everybody wants one, which we were hoping, because that way it allows the commercial units to have more parking spaces, and they're more than willing to buy those parking spaces. So that's one issue, just how you deal with that in the code. And I mean, I think Jim, you know, you guys have two issues really here, right? One is the students overtaking the housing and, you know, that sort of thing, and the issues related to that. The other one's affordability. I think Jim gave a good solution when he talked about what UT and Austin did around the universities. They just rezoned it and said, we're going to have it, we're going to have it here, and we're going to allow it to grow. And you know, so you might want to look at the height limits around the university area a little bit more. Now, that's not probably going to be a very favorable thing. And then you couple that with understanding what the affordability issues are, who needs it, and work with employer-assisted programs like the example that Adriana brought up. Make that part of an incentive package when the next Amazon comes in or whatever. That's the last thing I'll say on that.
I'll just finish with an offer. So now I'm really intrigued about this, what can you do about investors in California buying all our homes question. So we're running numbers. I've been working with the think tanks, run some numbers for Abby's group. I'm looking at different return on investment scenario planning calculations. If you guys do want to dig into this a little bit, I'll offer to help because I'm really interested in this question too. And I know that there are other communities out there that have gone through this before that I think you always hesitate to look at things outside of Texas because for whatever reason, I like to think only things that happen in the state are applicable to our own communities. But I'll make that offer. If that's something you guys want to dig into as a follow-up, we'd be glad to take that.
Very much. Final comment on the downtown parking. If our goal is to attract employers and certain tech employers or regional headquarters, something like that, parking is something we're going to have to look into because they're going to need it. Maybe not one-to-one, right? Because maybe they'll be taking other types of transportation. They'll live nearby and bike or walk to work. But another question is, of the 38,000 student population Texas State has, the number of commuters that commute in from Austin and San Antonio is, I think, 12,000 or so. I mean, it's a significant number of students so that is a very different situation, I think, than some of our other cities that we're looking at that are college communities. Because we're located between Austin and San Antonio, and so many of those students are just driving in, going to school and driving back, that's, again, a lot of cars. A lot of cars to park, a lot of cars to deal with. Once they're here, they walk around and there's alternatives for them to get about. But that is another kind of aspect to think about.
So thank our panel. I actually want to wrap things up. We're about 10 minutes off of our time. So what that'll mean is reducing our break to about 5 minutes and having folks come back at quarter after. And Abby's going to give the update on the status of the draft code and what we've been hearing from folks in the community. So thank you all very much for
positions and we'll try to get this going again. I think we're missing 2 council members, but I know where they're at.
I don't need to stay anymore, right? No, you are free. I'm done. Peace out, sister.
And we can go ahead and get everyone back to their positions. We'll do our best to, what, maybe 8:15, is that kind of the goal, Abby? 8-ish? 8:05? That's so quiet in here.
I know.
I know Jane stepped out. I think Jane is back, and here comes Lisa. And we're short one, but I think we're okay. And Abby? Okay. Give us 1 more minute. We're going to get started. We just want to grab it.
Okay. All right, so this next part of the presentation, I want to go over just a little bit of where we've been in this process, some of the comments that we've received, and then also where we're going. So this process started in July of 2014, so we've been at this for a little while. Really, it started with our comprehensive plan in 2012. This is something the community has been working on for a long time. So I'm going to go over just a little bit and sort of take you back what we've done, what we've heard along the process. So we started the CodeSMTX process with our Rhythm of the Street. This was really the public piece of this process has started at the high level. It started with reimagining, and really thinking about what could we do, what can we do. And so that was really the first. We actually changed the way of the streets for a day. And it's really just about raising awareness about the event and about the process and about the code. Then we had our code rodeo, which is when we brought in our consultants and designers that were working on the project. And we took those things that people have been imagining and we started drawing them out. And so that was part of this process. We have reimagined places through design, through drawing. We also, throughout this process, have worked really hard on making sure to take the message out to people. And so we've gone out to schools, we've taken things to the concerts in the park, the music in the park, so that we could really try to talk to people and different people that we don't always talk to. This woman up here, I remember a conversation with her. This is where we made really big maps and we brought them out to a concert in the park. And this woman said she looked at the map and she saw written all over it, no multifamily, no more multifamily. And she was looking at it, and she said, I just don't understand. I can't find a place to live. I'm a family, and I can't find anywhere that I can afford. So I think it goes back to our conversation that we had earlier today. But just for me, it was really important to be able to take that message out, talk to people where they are. We did neighborhood workshops. So we went out and we really dived in deep to look at neighborhoods and look at what is it about these places that people really want to protect and preserve, so that we can make sure to write that into the code and make that part of this process. We had environmental workshops where we started asking some tough questions. We know that the environment is a big piece of this code throughout the process. During this workshop, we asked some questions about values and priorities for us as a community. What is it that we really value? What are our priorities, right? And so a lot of what we heard, a lot of what was to be expected. Downtown and the river, San Marcos River is extremely important. Some of what's come out of the conversations during the workshops is to make sure that we have appropriate buffers around those places that are really important and that we value as a community. So San Marcos River, as well as the Sesame Creek watershed, which drains right into the San Marcos River. We also, during this process and many of the processes that we in the public events, we redesigned and we looked at how can design solve some of these issues? How can we shape our roads and our infrastructure to be able to accommodate lit or other types of practices like green infrastructure? We sent out postcards to everybody that was in an intensity zone in our comprehensive plan. We said on that postcard, look, you're in an intensity zone. Our comprehensive plan said this is an area of change. We want you involved in this process. Please come out and join us. And so we got a lot more people involved at that point. Our mailing list started at 150 people. It's now at 650 people or 690, and that gets spread every time we send that e-newsletter. So we've gotten a lot of people involved in this process throughout the way. We did designs when we said, hey, come out. This might affect your property, when we showed plans and designs as to how those places could be affected. All throughout, we've been asking folks, we've been asking questions, how are we doing? Where and are we on the right track? So we put out on one of our first open houses, we put out a questionnaire and a survey that went along with that open house. We supplied that online as well. This was before the code was drafted, and we said, hey, you can see the question there is, are these strategies on the right track? That's the question that we were asking. So we look at each of the different areas of the comprehensive plan and the code, and we said, hey, the comprehensive plan says to do this. Here's what we're proposing in the code. Are we on the right track? And we got pretty, you can see here that we're up in the 4s out of a 0 to 5 in pretty much all of those areas. So it was at that point that we said, hey, we're ready to draft. We need to go in and create a draft of this document. And all along the process, we've been working really closely with our think tank. So we did the same sort of a question. We went through the same process in a much more detailed way with our think tank, where we said, and we presented an issue exploration report. So we said, here's what our comprehensive plan said. Here's what our current code says. Here's what we're proposing through CodeSMTX. And are we on the right track, essentially? Are we meeting all of the interests of the community? You guys, as a 9-member council-appointed committee, represent different stakeholder groups and different interests. And so our question is, are we meeting all of the interests in the community with this process? And so we had that report generated. Then we went to draft the code. And so that was released on May 27th. So it's we're pretty proud of it. I think it's a great draft of the code. It has we've cut down the number of pages on our code from about 600 down to closer to 400. We've got lots of really great graphics, lots of tables. I think it's very readable. It's easy to use. That was really some of the highest goals that we had for this project, is to make sure that this is an accessible code. It's a one that anybody can get in and really be able to find out what can I do with my property. After the code, we went out and we presented the code during an open house. We tried to get into as many details as we could. We tried to raise the issues that we had heard throughout this process that were some of the most important issues. And we put all that information onto boards. All of those are available online. It's still available online. So these are pretty detailed boards. A code is a really technical document. And so we've done our best throughout the process to be able to really open the pages and to show what's in there, and particularly what's in there that is important from what we've heard to this community. We had another survey, and now you can see our question has started to narrow. And we're actually presenting, here are the standards that are proposed in this draft code, and how well do those standards address the issues that are important to San Marcos. So again, we got pretty high marks on a lot of those standards. The code is out for review and comment. We've got 10,000 comments, over 1,000 comments on the code. These are some of the big topics that really rose to the surface. So things like parking, modifying standards in a lot of different ways, a lot of different places throughout the code. So that's really one of the more general topics, modifying standards to meet the intent. So folks went in and said, hey, here's your standard for this district, but that's really not going to get you what I think, whoever that commenter is, what I think is needed to meet the intent of what San Marcos needs. So we got those types of comments. We got comments on our parkland and transportation, so that's the infrastructure type comments. We got a lot of comments on balancing neighborhood protection and affordability, the things that you all raised tonight with our panel. You know, really, how do we get affordable housing while still protecting neighborhoods? That's a big issue for us in San Marcos, and we got a lot of comments as expected along that. Transparency and predictability in the development process. This was one that I was actually more surprised that we got as many comments as we did. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that this piece of the code is probably the most similar to our current code. But that was something that we saw a lot of comments about, is making sure that folks have enough time to be able to be involved in the process, in the development process, and that there's enough transparency in that process. So that was a big piece of the comments. The biggest really was the environmental section and modifying the environmental standards to incorporate LID, and also to really look at our waterways and how to best protect our waterways and buffer zones. So those were the big pieces of the code, the things that we had the most comments on. I want to take us quickly just to next steps. So this is what's going to happen in the next coming months as we move towards adoption of the code. We've talked a little bit about there's three more big steps and three more pieces that go into this revisions process. One is that Vision Tomorrow software, or that modeling that Brian mentioned that he's working on with us. And so what that Envision Tomorrow is, it's an open source tool that allows us to really go in. It's Excel based, and it's a modeling software. It was used in the Envision Central Texas process. It's been used in a lot of different processes in different communities. And what you're able to do is it uses some of the zoning code parameters. So for example, you can say, okay, what we're doing is we're comparing current code, what we do now, and what is our code now, to what is the proposed code. And we're saying, okay, so if we shift the parking standards like this, what does that do to our ROI, to our property values, tax assessment? What does it do to all of these different indicators? If we incorporate different diverse housing types, what does that do to affordability? And so what this model does is it's able it's capable of producing those types of statistics for the purpose of comparing these different types of scenarios. What we've done is we've gone ahead and we picked 3 different scenarios. We picked one that's a smaller infill type of scenario in a high density place, like Fort William, around that area, in the Midtown area. We've picked one that is a larger undeveloped tract of land, more greenfield, a lot more acres, sort of in another one of our intensity zones. It's a more medium intensity zone around the high school. We've picked another one that's in a neighborhood area. So we take these 3 different scenarios and we compare how does the code work in those different areas. A lot of the indicators that we are planning to look at through this modeling is, one, the land use distribution. So how much multifamily, how much single family, how much retail are we getting out of the 2 different codes? Are we really meeting those indicators that we're looking for out of the comprehensive plan? How many people can we fit? What's the dwelling units per acre? If we want to fit a whole lot of people in that Midtown intensity zone, if that's where we want to fit people as they come here, are we meeting that with our code? Is our code allowing that many people to live in that area? Housing type distribution, so rental versus own. That's the other type of thing that the model looks at. Housing affordability, employment, and public finance. So what is a property tax revenue per acre? What is a sales tax revenue per acre under both of these different codes in each scenario? So those are the kinds of numbers that we're going to be able to produce and come back with. So that's one piece. Sorry.
Abby, before you go on.
Abby, so in this Envision Tomorrow, will it also be able to go into, let's say you're in a single family neighborhood, low to moderate income, and there's an empty lot infill, let's say that this neighborhood says that they want to go ahead and put a little bit of diversified housing, a little bit more density. Will this model, before we open that door up, tell them tell them how that will affect their property taxes afterwards, so they don't end up having to move out of their neighborhood because they can no longer afford property taxes? I know this has happened a lot in Austin, and it's one thing to create affordable housing and create more density. Is another thing, moving low to moderate income people out of neighborhoods where they no longer are able to get the services that they need. So will that calculation and vision tomorrow help us with that? Because I don't want to see us doing that to our residents as well, just for the sake of densifying and allowing more affordable housing, moving people out that they were able to afford over time.
Yeah, that's a really important piece. And one of the nice things about this model is that the way that it is better and more useful to us is the more that we can review it. So it's a model, right? So the numbers you put into it, if we get those numbers back and we say, wait a minute, you know, there's something going on, and that's really the job of our think tank. As we take this stuff forward to our committee, we'll be able to look at it, punch holes in it, and say, wait a minute, we need to reassess how we're doing things, to add new stuff and to take into consideration new indicators and new things to report. So yes. Yeah. The next step is testing the code. So what we'll be doing there is we'll be running projects through. So we'll take a project, we'll run it through as if it was under the old code, and now as if it's under the new code, and see what the results are. And so that's another effort that we'll be working on with our think tank through the months of September and October. We'll also be looking at all of these comments that we received, as well as more comments that continue to come in. And we've got right now a big spreadsheet, which I think I gave you all, which y'all have a copy of in your packet there. And one of the things that we're doing is we're going to go through that spreadsheet we've already done. So we've taken all of those comments that we received, we've already classified them and put them into those buckets. You saw those big buckets, that's where all of these comments have come from. They've gone into the bucket, and we'll go through another step as well of going in and responding to each comment. Is this something that's being accounted for in the code? A lot of those technical comments, for example, we'll be able to go in and put a check mark and say, yep, we've got it. And so that's what will come back to you as well. So it'll be an analysis of here are all the comments that we received. Here are the ones that staff would recommend go right into the code. Here are the ones that we'd like to have further discussion on and policy direction from council and the recommending bodies throughout the process. So that's another step that happens during this revision process. I want to, right now, our May 27 draft of the code is still the draft that's up there, and we're still receiving comments on. Staff has not made any changes to that draft, and we won't be making any changes to that draft until it goes through this revisions process. So what that will be is once we get through with those two other steps that I talked about with the think tank, we have our modeling, we've gone through and looked at some just different scenarios, we've received all the comments, we've classified them, we've gone in and said, yeah, this is a great idea, this is something we need to talk about and raise up. We'll come and we'll develop some staff recommendations. Those recommendations for revisions will go to the Planning Commission. We'll also be going to our other boards, recommending bodies and boards as well, with any of the recommendations that affect their areas, whether it's HPC or Parks Board. We'll come to P&Z. They'll provide recommendations based on those. Those will come to you all. You all provide direction, and at that point, we go into the process of making revisions. So after we get council direction is when we go and we start writing and drafting, and that will take a little while. So we'll need some time to get in there and make those revisions, and we'll be producing a more finalized draft of that code, and that's what will come forward for approval. So with that, we'll open it up. I think Diana's going to lead us through some questions.
So really, what we wanted to do was keep it pretty high level, but in your package you've got what the staff has been hearing from the community. What we're wanting to understand is what are you all hearing from the community? What kinds of issues seem to be rising to the top that are important for the team to consider? So just kind of a broad question, really, what kind of issues at this point in the process are you hearing? What kinds of things are you hearing in the community? What kind of issues are coming up for folks relative to the code and the code revision process?
Well, and for sake of just coordination, I'll start on this and I'll pass my turn around, and we'll just work our way out there.
Great.
Well, I think we already heard it. I think the biggest problem we have, like we said before, is allowing diversified housing, all these different options and choices. But actually getting them on the market. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges.
I agree with Councilmember Pruitt, and I hope that y'all can look into deed restrictions and things like that. But I think the biggest elephant always in the room is the university, and I think many of us saw that article that came out a few months ago called "The University That Ate a City," and that's how a lot of people feel. They wish that we could make them put a cap on their enrollment. They wish that we could tell them they can't buy any more land, things like this. And we wish that, well, I know I'm in the we category in this one, we wish that they would take more responsibility in creating more housing. So I think that there's more of a communication that needs to happen with us, the city, between the university to work out some of our mutual problems.
And I think that same thing was shared in the previous conversations with the panel. One thing I'd also add on, and this does touch with the university, the question that I put up, or the comment that I put up earlier in regards to concerns, was also revolving around the volume of inventory that we have that's been entitled but not yet developed. And as that does progress over however many years, the impact that has on our infrastructure, our public safety, especially those public safety needs, and being able to take care of not only a growing community, but what we're looking at in the future, and not receiving a significant portion of property tax from the university that does have a significant number of taller buildings, which we have the obligation of being able to make those public safety investments in, and those are sizable. And so I think that's something that we wanted to take to the legislature last year. Again, kind of touching on the whole state institution issue. My hope is to be able to take that back to the legislative session again in 2017. But I think all of those kind of blend together and create other concerns for the future that encompass housing, encompass university challenges, but also are issues that we've faced for almost 20 years and that have been slowly addressed, but not to the magnitude that they really need to be addressed.
I've had some conversations with folks with respect to the environmental side. The drainage is probably our least funded enterprise fund, yet living in the city we live in with the convergence of our rivers and tributaries, it's the most important issue facing our city right now. Certainly the opportunity to properly deal with water on site versus having it figure out ways to collect it off-site and get rid of it. We struggle with solutions for watering our lawns during certain times of the year, yet we get rid of water and let it go, and we don't try to capture it and use it. So I'm really concerned about trying to see how that might impact our infrastructure, our overall city infrastructure investments long term. So we don't have to build such big cavernous ditches to get rid of water. We can retain it inside. I think there's some real opportunities there. I think the certainty of the process for the development community, I mean, we can clearly attract, if we figure out that solution that we talked about between student housing and community housing and affordability and things, I think with certainty we're in a great position, particularly with our economic side of growth, to be able to get a lot of participants in that process if we can provide certainty of the process. And lastly, really just the to ensure transparency in the process. That we have a clear, I guess the certainty goes for not only the development community, but for the community at large, so that we know we have a process that we can all live with, we all understand. There's no end arounds or anything like that, so there's comfort in that process.
I agree with what the other council members have said. The housing, where should students live, affordable housing and flooding, those are all issues facing us whether we've got a new code coming or not. I think what I've been hearing is the concern, the uncertainty. What's going to happen to my neighborhood? Because not everything is known yet. The code's not quite complete yet. asset. And so that uncertainty, my property values, my neighborhood, how will my neighborhood change, if any, that's going to be, that's huge for some people.
And some of the stuff that I've been hearing, some of it relates to, for those that do know that or are aware that we're actually doing a rewrite, and other ones that relate to the code rewrite that are just general comments is it's said before, of course, with the explosive growth, where are we going to put everybody that we know is coming? We know they're coming. The affordable housing issue is definitely one that I hear a lot, and tonight was incredibly helpful, I think. Thank you for the panel. And I think it really definitely added to the depth of my understanding based on the affordable housing policy that we crafted a few years ago. And then finally, parking issues. That's one that, well, that's a perennial one. But I think that's also one that I'm hearing as decisions are to be made soon.
So let me ask you another question that I think at the surface will feel kind of unusual or odd, but is there anything that's surprising you as your role as council members that you're not hearing in the community discourse? Is there anything that surprises you about what's not in the conversation right now in the community that you kind of know from your lens and the role you play is an important issue, but maybe that's not in the community conversation so much?
I think what I'm really surprised about, I know when I was campaigning on campus that a lot of the students actually thought that we were responsible for building houses for them. So the reason that they didn't have dorms was our fault. And vice versa, when in talking to people that live in our community that are not students or are non-traditional students, they have no idea that the university, none of their property is on the tax rolls. So they think we're making tons of money. And why don't we have tons of money to fix the roads with and things like that? So I think there's just a general not understanding since the university is so huge, it's almost the same size as the city and has about the same amount of influence who's in charge of what. And I think that's the most surprising to me.
I think just one of the things that surprised me recently is for so many years we've had a conversation about job growth and about job creation in San Marcos, and we've had a number of successes over the past, I'll say 5 years, that have really boosted numbers of jobs, but that the categories of those jobs are not I think what we would all hope for. The $75,000, $100,000 per year career, knowledge base, all the types of jobs that we've always talked about in all of our visioning. But in the community, I think there's a sense that there's a lot of new jobs, but I'm surprised that I don't hear that hunger and the desire and more conversation about those types of jobs that we really want to shoot.
So within the code, I think that we are going to be trying to incentivize growth on the east side of the highway just with less restrictive codes because of the environmental sensitivity. Is that correct? We've talked about that for a while.
That's right, yes.
So are you also putting into the code as well how to deliver amenities or services to the east side of the highway, which always lacks on everything? Is that going to be somehow in the code where when developments go in, we're going to be looking for X, Y, and Z? Library satellites, grocery stores, fire, all the things the west side always gets it, the east side doesn't, because that's going to be part of spurring growth on the east side with economic development. So is that in the code anywhere to get that going?
Yes, so where we are increasing our standards for both parkland as well as roads and transportation networks. And so for a community that's growing, you know, our comprehensive plan talks about growing in specific places and trying to do a lot of our growth in that sort of infill in those areas where we want to increase density. So we don't want to spread out as much. We want to try and focus growth in a more dense way in the areas that are identified on our comp plan. So that's number one, and I think that's one of the most important pieces of protecting our environment is to try not to spread out and sprawl out, but try to grow in more compact ways in those areas where our comp plan identified growth. And so we want to make sure that our code allows that. Where we do see greenfield development, which our comp plan also indicates places where we should be growing on the east side, as you referenced, we want to make sure that as that growth happens, we're providing all of the services, all the connectivity, and all of that goes along with it. So our codes have changed in that place. That was in that slide there where it had the buckets of things. When we looked at a lot of the comments we got were infrastructure and public parks and infrastructure. Those requirements are changing, and we have gotten comments about that. So, yes.
So actually, the last round of conversation, we have a few minutes left, is to actually build on your question in a way that says, asks of each of you, what is a real opportunity that you see with the code, and is there a question or something that staff can answer either now or that you want further clarity around as we proceed? So I heard your question about, okay, so as growth on the eastern part unfolds, how is it that services and other amenities are going to be located there? So I'm going to start, actually, Councilmember, with you, because I'll give you a chance to give another question. Well, what's the big opportunity you see, and is there a question or concern or something that you'd like to understand more relative to the code?
I think the question I have in that, and the question I've had for a very long time, is how do you gain that missing middle housing type, and how do you do it in a way that the community can feel comfortable and safe and be assured that it's going to be compatible with the surrounding. Because I read the whole book, and I read all your comments about, you know, residential that shouldn't be, or that isn't compatible, should not be added in this location. So how are you all? I'm not the expert. You're the main expert. How do you get us the missing middle product that you continue to say we need, but that we can't seem to get past? That's my question and my challenge to you.
So again, the opportunity you see and the kind of underlying question or challenge that you might have.
The opportunity is
Close to you.
The opportunity is going to be having some great growth and well planned and organized in the new areas. It's going to be wonderful. My concern is how we're going to be implementing that in our existing neighborhoods, because some folks are happy with their neighborhood the way that it is. In other areas, there's room for some improvement and some opportunity. And so how we fit all of that in the second category is going to require a lot of skill and play.
I think one of the challenges is, we talk about compatibility. Compatibility isn't necessarily the type of use, it's who uses it. And so that, to me, you can have a couple of single-family homes, as we have single-family neighborhoods, and we see a rental property that's occupied by someone that's less caring, their yards overgrown, there are cars in the parking lot, or cars in the street, those types of things. So that's an incompatible use, if you will, in a single-family residential, established single-family residential neighborhood. So that's one thing. The opportunities, I think, are to achieve what you talked about, which is a denser city. We have, I always said, there's three ways that we have a fiscal responsible city. We deal with property values per square mile, we deal with our tax rate, we deal with level of service. So we can get a more dense city that has more property values per square mile, and we can see our service level increase and our tax rate decrease. So those are the kinds of things that I think we have an opportunity to achieve here if we can respect the boundaries of what we want to develop. We see that, we seek for ways to develop inside those boundaries, and we guard against the possibility of allowing us to get outside those rules and begin to develop way outside of those boundaries.
And what's kind of going through my mind is looking at this as also as an opportunity for collaboration and coordination. About 5 years ago, we went through an exercise and kind of looking at the edges of the municipal boundaries and seeing where, how we connect and how we engage and interact with our neighboring communities and understanding their growth challenges and their needs and what they're trying to get accomplished for each of their communities as well. And I think 5 years is a good opportunity for us, especially as we're getting ready to roll out here, and going back and re-engaging in those conversations and kind of getting a sense of where our ETJs are, being proactive and being able to establish some agreements if there is a need as we're looking towards the east as being our primary area of potential growth. And also on the collaboration side, re-engaging as well with the county, with TxDOT, getting a greater sense now that 110 is really beginning to take shape. How does our plan kind of fit within what's developing around 110, whether it be residential, whether it be commercial, things of that nature, and seeing, just making sure that everything is still projected to where it was supposed to have been when those developments and conversations initiated several years back. And I think that those would be welcome conversations in both the county and the state.
Okay, I have a couple. I'm interested in how we're going to manage transition zones or transition areas, buffers, that kind of thing. I saw some really great examples of units that were, fourplexes or what have you, that actually looked like homes in the neighborhoods. And I'd like to see us do something like that with deed restrictions or age restrictions like Lindsay Hill had proposed. However, I don't want to see, any kind of usage where we would have hotel, an older population of rental and retail and restaurants, and that was just way too much. So I'm really interested in how we're going to pin down what we're going to do with the transition areas, and I want to learn more about that. I also really think we need to get on these regional drainage detention areas that we plan to have before all the land is gone. Like if you think about over on Ford, I can't even think where we have one, and we're now offering incentives for no on-site drainage catchment because we're going to provide these regional drainage areas. So we need to get on that if that's what we're going to do, and we need to start looking at land and getting it while we can. I'm very concerned about that.
Councilmember Lynn, can I ask you to frame just one answer in response to what opportunity you see? And it might be that you would get ahead of growth, or is there an opportunity here that you see?
We have a lot of opportunities. It's what we choose to focus our time on. I would like...
With regard to the code revision, with regard to this process.
Just regarding the code revision, I think our greatest opportunity and our greatest challenge, like Councilmember Tamides said, is finding that missing middle. And how do we do that without creating fear in the neighborhoods that something is going to happen where that is going to turn into student housing or deteriorate or be of inferior quality. I think that's our biggest challenge and our biggest, thing that we, opportunity we have.
So I think the opportunity lies in, if we get this code right, because I think that the staff, and I really want to congratulate all of you guys on the work you've done. You have really put in a lot of hours and done a lot of outreach. If we get this code right, I think we're going to create the community that I know we are. We've got an amazing cultural diversity. We'll see that in different parts of our community and neighborhoods, which we talk about all the time through this code rewrite. And I think with that, we'll see a lot of people coming into our community that will respect us enough to come because we've respected ourselves. I think we'll see I think we're going to see our education system increase. We'll start to see a lot more kids in our school districts. I think we're going to see just a healthier community in general. So if this code is going to do what it does, it's going to create a predictability for the people who live here for their property rights. I think that's something that gets missed a lot. We always talk about the property rights, the guy that owns a property that wants to develop, and we forget about the property rights of the people who live here, work here, and put their kids in school here. One thing that nobody's really talked about yet, but I think is always on our mind, and I don't know how much of it is in the code per se. As the population increases in San Marcos, we have a lot of people that are coming to our river systems and our parks that we're not able to keep up with. I don't know if we can address that somewhere in the code, but if there is some place to do so, I think we really need to, because it's a discussion, I think, in the last 2, 3, 4 years, and we've been promoting our beautiful river system, that we're not able to keep up with keeping it clean and healthy any longer.
Well, I see that it's 8 o'clock. I want to honor folks' time because I know it's getting late tonight. Abby, do you want to have any closing thoughts, comments? I know you covered next steps already.
Yep.
Anything else?
I really appreciate the conversation, and I'm looking forward to this revisions process and continuing to work on this code to be able to bring a great draft forward to you all through that approval process.
Again, I think it was mentioned earlier, but thank you so much for all the work, and we really appreciate all the time and effort that's been put into this project, and certainly it's still progressing. There's a number of steps remaining prior to its final adoption. But again, thank you to everyone for being a part of this. With that, that'll bring us to our question and answer session from the press and public. I know there's certainly all those. If any of you have any questions, please stand, and we'll pass the microphone around. And again, it's for questions regarding items that were discussed this evening, and we'll do our very best to make sure that we get your question answered.
Okay, I appreciate all the hard work y'all did put this panel together. It was very, very informative. My only suggestion maybe in the future, Lisa Marie Campoletta, San Marcos News Live. Maybe in the future y'all can have some ecologically minded people. I was kind of shocked when the speakers said he wasn't sure and that he advocated we had increased density next to the university. I'm not sure how a speaker can come invited to our community and not know that right by the university is a historic neighborhood in which people have invested lots of money. And so I would just suggest in the future that maybe we have some, because 2 of those speakers advocated increased density and cited University of Texas as an exemplar model. And then I guess the other thing is there's impacts such as the aquifer and caves, the traffic, as well as all the demolition that would impact those neighbors. So perhaps we can have more of a panoramic panel. The 3rd speaker on that panel did work for the sanctuary loft. So I just thought that was very strange. I say that we stick with the comprehensive plan and build in the areas that are most appropriate. Thanks.
Are there any other questions at this time? Any other questions? Thank you very much. With that then, we have completed our business for this evening, and we will be adjourned at 8:01 p.m. Thank you, everyone.